Who's scruffy looking?
So, you've watched all the Star Wars movies, but now you want to get into the franchise a little bit more. How do I do that? Well, the first thing you need to do is subscribe right here and become part of the subscription legion so that you're the first to know when I post a new video right here on Talking with My Hans. But then what? Where do I go? What do I read? What do I watch? Luckily for you, I've put together a nice 5-step plan for you to get more into the Star Wars franchise. Don't worry, I've broken it down nice and simple. I got a graphic coming up for how you can get more into the Star Wars cinematic universe. Okay, let's hit the graphic. Okay, here it is, the 5 phases to getting into the Star Wars universe. First things first, there are indeed 5 separate phases to this. The only reason for that is, personally, I don't feel like newcomers to the expanded universe can appreciate the stories in the higher tiers until they've experienced the previous tiers' installations. Secondly, you can see there's some lines going from story to story, and that's just to illustrate that those stories complement each other really nicely in my opinion. Also, if you see a bunch of stories lumped together, it's because they interconnect and should be treated as such. I'll get into that a little bit more as we go along, so let's get started. I'm going to assume that you have already watched all 9 saga films in addition to Rogue One and Solo. If you haven't, I have no idea why you're on this channel, so we're just going to skip that. If you have not seen any of the Star Wars TV shows, that's a shame because next to the movies are the best thing going right now. The Clone Wars and Rebels are seemingly wrapped up, but The Mandalorian Season 2 is coming in October. So if you haven't seen any of these television or stream shows, that would be the one I'd start with. Phase 2. This is where you've decided to take the leap into becoming a bigger brain Star Wars fan. If you got yourself a PS4 or an Xbox or a PC, it's time to get Jedi Fallen Order. Cal Kestis' journey of rediscovering the Force after Order 66 was so good, Lucasfilm decided that they aren't just going to make a sequel, they'll be giving Fallen Order almost a whole franchise worth of stories as well. So it's worth getting into, especially now because it's reduced in price. But if you're not a game person, the story you need to start with is Lost Stars by Claudia Gray. This is, for all intents and purposes, the best canon novel written yet. It's a story of a boy and a girl stuck on opposite sides of the war between the Rebellion and the Empire, and all they want to do is be together. I read all 551 pages of this book in 2 days. It really is that good. That is why, if you're going to choose one of these two, make it Lost Stars. If you've made it to Phase 3, congrats! You're really on your way to becoming a true Star Wars nerd. There's a few ways you can go here, and they all depend on your personal preference. If you're into the prequel trilogy, or the Clone Wars, or you just like learning about the intricacies of the Force, definitely check out Master and Apprentice by the same Claudia Gray. And listen to the audiobook version, yes, it really does have to be the audiobook, of Dooku Jedi Lost. Master and Apprentice chronicles Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon's relationship prior to Episode 1, and Dooku Jedi Lost is all about Dooku's fall from grace in the Jedi Order. They both cross over and feature a bunch of the same characters, so if you do one, you should do the other as well. If you're a big fan of the original trilogy, you gotta read Alphabet Squadron by Alexander Freed. This is a good one. A former Imperial fighter ace and a ragtag group of pilots hunt down one of the final elite TIE fighter squadrons after Endor. Really, really good. It's a great book to jump into what the Rebellion is like post-Endor, and it puts a lot of those who volunteered to fight the Empire simply out of necessity in a tight spot because there is no Empire, so what's the point of having a rebellion? It's getting a sequel this summer and another after that, so I'd check it out soon. However, the one book out of Phase 3 that I think is a must-read is Bloodline, also by Claudia Gray. This is a good one because it's really the perfect precursor to the sequel trilogy. If you really want to know the hows and whys of the galaxy at the time of the sequels, all you'll need is one read through of this and you'll totally get it, which is why this book is the must-read out of Phase 3. In Phase 4, there's a couple of different trilogies of books that I put in along with the main Marvel Star Wars comic run. Taking time to commit to a trilogy of novels or any of the many issues of the Star Wars series of comics is a serious step, so if you're not quite at that level yet, or if you really like Bloodline, or if you're just really into the prequel trilogy stuff, then check out Queen's Shadow.
If you feel like Padme was sort of an underwhelming character, then this book will definitely change your mind. I haven't watched episode 1 the same since I read it. If you're a Rebels fanatic, or you just like a good original trilogy read, then the Thrawn trilogy is for you. Timothy Zahn's writing is the real winner here. He writes Thrawn like nobody else, and shows off his tactical mind in the absolute most thrilling way possible. Even if you don't read it at first, don't miss this trilogy because he's getting a second one coming later this year. In Phase 4, I also added our first comics of the bunch.
So here's the thing with comics and not getting into them too early. First of all, there's a lot of them, and not just in the main Marvel Star Wars comic run. And B, they're not the best self-contained stories. The comics are the lowest priority on the hierarchy of Star Wars stories, and they're an easy way for stuff to get slipped into canon, and that kind of devalues the story a little bit. They can also be confusing at times because they reference each other a lot and some stories that you might have not read at this point in your Star Wars journey. That's not to say that there aren't good stories in the comics, because there's a lot. Just getting to them can be particularly confusing or difficult.
The main Star Wars run is on its second installment right now, in between Empire and Jedi, but this first set covers the time between A New Hope and setting up Echo Base. It's a fun adventure with some really great artwork and familiar faces, and worth the read if you have the time. The trilogy you should read, though, is the Aftermath trilogy. These books got some not-so-great reviews when they came out, but now that time has passed a little, they've turned into the best source of information between the Battle of Endor and the final battle of the Galactic Civil War on Jakku. If you liked Alphabet Squadron, this trilogy will be right up your alley. There are some really memorable characters in these books, and it's a fantastic adventure throughout. I definitely recommend this set over the rest of Phase 4. Okay, Phase 5 is loaded, so I'm just going to do my best, because if you've reached this point, you're most likely going to read all of these. If you liked Queen Shadow, the Ahsoka book was also written by E.K. Johnston and is pretty quick, so you might really like that. Lords of the Sith isn't my personal favorite, but if you like the alternate point of view from the bad guys, it's a cool look inside Vader and the Emperor's relationship. Speaking of certain points of view, From a Certain Point of View is a book of 40 short stories from both side and main characters during A New Hope. It sounds boring, but let me tell you, this book was probably the most fun I've had reading a Star Wars book, so pick this one up at the first chance you get. And if you're really digging the comics, check out Dr. Aphra and some of the Vader series. Dr. Aphra is a perfect story for the comics because they can get super weird and wild, and they explore crazy parts of the galaxy, so they're all a really good time. Vader and her meet multiple times, so don't be surprised if they leak into each other. Anything written by Charles Soule is usually pretty good. But the two stories I'd recommend the most are Battlefront 2 and Resistance Reborn. Both are excellent love letters to the current Star Wars canon, and if you've read or watched a bunch of stories by now, these two are a great reward for all your hard work. Battlefront 2 follows the story of Iden Versio and the elite Imperial Inferno Squad, and Resistance Reborn is the prelude to The Rise of Skywalker, and it's how the Resistance rebuilds following their defeat on Crate. If you're gonna do them both, play Battlefront first, then go ahead and read Resistance Reborn.
There you have it, everyone, the 5 steps to getting into the Star Wars cinematic universe just a little bit deeper. You know, this is a question I get asked a lot. Hey, talking with my Hans, I just watched the Clone Wars, what should I do now? Hey, talking with my Hans, I just saw Rebels and I want to know more about those characters, where do I go? It's a question I really don't mind answering, and I'm glad I can make this video to kind of put out my general answer. If you know somebody that's in this same position, go ahead, share this video with them. And if you think I missed something, leave it in the comments. Is there a story that I missed that I think, probably should be early on that people should be reading? Let me know. But until then, I'll see you later.